Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
I mean, there's just so much about what we say. And I think one of the most important things is, like, we've talked about this, but like living with a clear conscience. So if in your mind you can't say any cuss words with a clear conscience, then please don't.
Right.
Like, please don't. But also, can you take that and apply it to just other conversations you have? Like, can you really walk away from that conversation with a clean conscience where you spent the whole time talking about what someone else was doing? And I think it applies the same, like, it applies the same way. It's really important, I think, to like do your best to live life with a clear conscience. Like, it's something I've been working on for a while, far from nailing it all the time. But like, it's something in my life I'm striving towards. Um, and I think that like being aware of your words is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I guess maybe what I'm hoping to get out of this is the ability to remove the mask and not pretend like I don't say those words, but
Sure.
know that my intention is never to curse. And I'm
Yeah.
very particular about that. But also, like, can we just shed some light on the fact that there's plenty of that stuff that happens without using colorful language?
Oh.
And honestly, it's kind of got to stop. Sorry, it's just true.
Oh, I
Like,
agree.
it's bringing the death into the prayer life. And why? You know? And
Yeah.
we've talked so many times about coming to a place of appreciating people's differences and different perspectives and like even opposing perspectives. Like,
Hmm.
this is part of the journey, and like really learning to appreciate it even when people seem like they're polar opposite from you. Say the opposite thing you would say, do the opposite thing that you think is right, but can you allow space for people to still function according to who they are and what they're called to do?
Yeah.
um and I would say the same, like, even when you're in your prayer closet in like the most private of times, can you bring something to the Lord without trying to block someone else's effort to be with the Lord too?
Mm.
And it's hard. Like, I've been part of that before where it's like, oh, these people are doing this, we need to pray against that. You know what I mean? Well, maybe they have a mandate for that. Maybe they're supposed to be doing it exactly that way. And maybe you're supposed to be doing it exactly this way, but do you actually need to get in the way of them doing it?
Mm.
Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
I think it's a really powerful thing to like stop and think. And maybe you end up deciding, no, I actually do want to pray against that. Like, sure, maybe you do. But like, does it just roll off your tongue mindlessly? Or is it a very intentional, I am praying this because I believe this? Like, yeah,
It's
there's a difference of just mindlessly cursing someone through talking about them versus like really thinking it out and having a reason.
Mhm. I would say almost like blindly cursing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I can think of a few different situations where, I mean, whether it's in a family or in a community or whatever, I mean, even other people in ministry who are walking probably at even higher levels than we've even thought of. Um, and I've seen people come in and go, "Oh, that looks like it's going against what we're doing, so we need to pray against them."
Hmm.
When the others have also been led by the Lord to do this. It's just probably a different piece that the one group didn't have that part of it, and this group does.
Right.
And can we, like you said, can we just like take a minute to get some perspective on it
Yeah.
and not,
Or information, like
yeah,
talk to the person
right,
about it, or if you can. And if you can't talk to the person about it because you don't actually know them, do you really have enough information to make that judgment?
right, right. Okay, third level. So, what about when you pray against something God's doing?
I think it's likely that we do that from at least some of the time. It's not 0% of the time.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I've been reading through the Bible, and I'm in the Old Testament, and there's multiple times where they go to war and they lose, and they're like get prophets and stuff, and they're like, oh no, God actually has you losing this battle. And I'm like, in the mindset that I have, I'm like, well, of course we would be praying against that. But there was actually, for whatever reason, like a reason that that was the path he wanted. And so, yeah, I just think it's like it says, his ways are not our ways, our thoughts are not his thoughts, his ways are higher, like whatever that verse is. Um, I think about that and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty presumptuous for me to say, well, this is exactly God's will in this situation. And it's possible that it is, and it's possible you are praying against the adversary.
Mhm.
But I just think sometimes we take such a generalistic approach of like, if it feels comfortable, it's got to be from God. If it feels difficult, it's got to be the adversary. And that's how we base our prayer life, is off of how we feel about it. Um,
Yeah.
but that may or may not be real. Like we might not have proper perspective to make a good judgment on it.
I think it's interesting. I mean, talking about this level of it, because even Yeshua prayed against God's will. He said, if it be your will, if it be your will, let the cup pass, right?
Sure. I don't know if that's praying against his will.
He knew
It's
what it
maybe
was.
asking him to change his will.
I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting thing because to me, it shows like the human condition
Yeah.
in hard situations.
Sure.
But also, he led as an example as to how to ask for something to pass or ask for that will to be shifted a bit. But if God says no, to still stick with it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say like endure it, but it's kind of exactly what he did, right?
Yeah.
Because it needed to happen. Also,
Yeah.
on the flip side, um, it through some different like um time seeking, whatever conversations with the Lord. I've had some times with him where he's shown me how he and his will um are set, but people ask all the time for their will to be done above his and how he will allow it to happen. And it's
Mm.
purely out of love. It then you get into like, is it ideal? Is it not ideal? I think his will is ideal, good, pleasing, and perfect will, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also interesting that you can pray for him to change his will to your will, and he obliges sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that there is um Well, there's definitely examples in the Bible where God changed his mind because someone prayed and asked. And so I think that that is like it's 100% a thing, and it's um yeah, I think it's 100% a thing. I think it's something that happens, and like you said, maybe it's like for us, like he's doing it for us. Um, but also like great, like thank you, thanks for uh, thanks for allowing that. Thanks for humoring me or whatever the thing is.
I mean, I think it shows the humility of, I mean, the being that has created all of heaven and earth
Mm,
and who carries all of eternity. I mean, like the vastness of who this being is to
mhm.
then like bend to our will for the sake of relationship or even just out of purely love.
Yeah.
Like I think that is a part of his character that we miss sometimes,
Mm,
you know? Um and I'll tell you one of the things I learned out of that conversation with him and going through some stuff and kind of practicing alongside him with that, it really shifted the way I looked at asking him for things. And maybe we've talked about this before, I'm not sure. Like since then, I've kind of stopped asking him, "Can I?" Because his answer is almost always yes. Even if it goes against something he's told me to do. If it's like, okay, let's say he has told me to do a 40-day water fast. He's never told me to do that. But let's say he did.
sure.
And I'm 10 days and I'm like, but can I have this meal full of carbs, protein, fats, and minerals?
Yeah.
His answer would almost undoubtedly be yes. But if I asked him instead, if I framed it a different way, if instead I said, should I, or would this be the best thing for me? Then the answer would be different.
Mhm.
And it is just a little bit different than it's like it's going from praying your own will into wanting to align with his will.
Sure.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean, when you say it like that, one of them is almost a I don't even think it's really done intentionally, but a manipulative prayer. Like
Yeah.
you're you're trying to frame the question in a way to get what you
It's
want.
favorable for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm,
Yeah. Whereas the other way, you're framing the question so that you can stay in line with what he has that is best.
yeah.
And it's different. It's like it's such a shift, you know?
Mm,
Yeah.
good thought.
Interesting. Yes. Okay. One last thing.
Yeah.
And we don't even have to talk about it. I'm just going to drop this out there. What about when people are praying things for their favorite sports teams, but there are people praying on both sides?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with a somewhat of a mentor about we have traded the stock market and crypto and stuff, and I had this conversation about that, like, can't I pray for some of this? And he was like, sure, but there's millions of people also doing that for possibly a different outcome than what you want. Like, and that's a real interesting thing. Like, is it, does your team win if you had the most people praying? I don't know. I don't exactly know how that works, but I
Is it?
do think that there is um, a very interesting dynamic when it comes to praying for global things.
Is it like tug of war with energy?
I wonder, yeah,
I mean, even with wars, I mean, there are two sides of every war, or at least two sides
sure,
of every war.
yeah,
And I would imagine if there are people of faith on either side, regardless of what faith, there's probably some praying going on.
yeah,
And that's hard, man.
yeah,
This is hard. I mean, this goes back to some of your Bible stuff that you were talking about. Like
hmm,
sometimes it's his will for it to be this way.
yeah.
And both sides don't typically win in a war or in a ball
Generally
game
not.
or in a
Yeah,
sports like
yeah,
setting, right? Like somebody has to become the victor
hmm,
and somebody has to become the ones who've been defeated. And I guess, I mean, what's the posture to take with that? Your will be done. Can I be
yeah,
content
yeah,
regardless?
yeah. I mean, I think the the closer we are to the Father's heart, the more we will see all those situations through his eyes, and the closer we will the closer we will be to be able to pray his will.
Sure.
Um but yeah, like I mean if you don't know, then say, "Hey God, this is what I would like the outcome to be, but I'm willing for it to be different if it's your will. Like can you help?" Like I'm just thinking like I believe God's will be done anyways. And so can how can you tune your nervous system to a place where you're not just constantly disappointed in a God who never answers you? Like,
It's okay. This is a really good point. I think this is important for people to hear. Say this again.
well, okay, let's see if I can say it again. I think it's important to tune your nervous system to a point where you're not just disappointed when God doesn't answer your prayers, or answer them the way you think He should. Um, and it's like a really it is so nuanced in my mind because there are definitely verses where it's like God says, knock, keep on knocking, keep on knocking, keep on knocking, and I'm going to answer. There's ones where he talks about the like, if if enemies know how to give good gifts to their kids, how much more so do I like there are plenty of verses that talk about him giving you what you're asking for. But also, I know that that doesn't just always happen. I've experienced it not just happening the way I want it to happen.
Mhm.
And so, how do you tune your nervous system to stay near to the Father's heart when you're disappointed about a situation? And I think some of that has to do with how you communicate with Him, the way you communicate with Him, and the way you ask Him for things. Because if you're framing it in a way where there is only one right answer, but you don't see the full picture, it's like my mind goes to like a kid who only wants to eat ice cream. Like there may be sometimes you let them have ice cream, but there's going to be a lot of times you don't let them have ice cream and they don't see the full picture. They just know the reward system that I eat ice cream, my brain makes all the happy chemicals. And so I'm going to do whatever I can to get more of the happy chemicals. But the parent knows that that isn't long term their best decision. And so, like, I think this so often that happens with God. And so, how can we tune ourselves to be in a place where we can have those moments with Him where the situation doesn't come out exactly how we want it, but we're still able to stay close and not, I mean, you can be disappointed. You can be disappointed
Sure.
in the way something happened, but can you be disappointed without that creating any type of barrier between you and God?
Yeah. Yeah. I keep thinking about Romans 8:28
Mm,
that says God works all things together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. And I'm just thinking about this even in regard to a war being fought. You know what I mean? There's
sure.
a victor and there's someone who's being defeated. And if you are on the side of defeat, do you trust him enough that he'll work this out for your good? You know what I mean? And I think some of this is a question of trust that his will is bigger and greater than anything that could possibly try to devastate you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, you even look at Job.
Mm,
I think that's a good example of some of that.
yeah.
Devastation was trying to hit him from every direction for years and years and years and years and years. And yet, did God still work it out? And was he still on his side? He was.
Mm.
And I
Yeah,
tend to,
Job's a complicated story if you're a Christian.
it is. It probably makes you feel all sorts of uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? I was also thinking about Josh. I had something else that was really interesting. Where was I going? Job. No. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Um, I wonder sometimes, I don't know if I'm convinced of this. I really am asking and I really am wondering about it. If some of this, like being on the side of the victor, the one who is defeated and having to kind of deal with how do you handle it on either side?
Mm,
Um, some of it, I wonder if you kind of take yourself out of the polarity. Um, if that helps to be able to, I guess, roll with the punches with whatever God's wanting to do, what his ultimate will is.
mm,
Because I think sometimes when you're in that system, it's totally the tree of knowledge. Like even the ice cream for dinner, right? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it good? Is it bad? And I think sometimes when you take yourself out of the polarity, you can start to really look for the life in things,
yeah.
right? So then when ice cream is fine now and it's not fine later, it's not mixed messages. It's just that it's not life giving then and it's not going to serve you well, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe being on the side of the victors will serve you well now, but it's not going to serve you well the next time. I don't know, but maybe that's where some of that contentment and where the devastation doesn't have to hit so hard,
Mm,
even though it might look on the outside like devastation, is being able to kind of step back from that polarity a bit. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm only just processing out loud.
yeah. No, it does make sense. I don't know that I have an answer because I feel like I've experienced it kind of both ways.
Mm.
And so yeah, I think it's something I would have to process. Um, but it's interesting. I'd love to hear the listeners' view on like, do you have experience with what we're talking about? Like, do you, I mean, I know we've covered a lot of territory in this episode.
Level
But
1, level 2, level 3,
yeah.
level XYZ.
I mean, all generally about words.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think that it is. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I would love to hear some thoughts from listeners on, do you feel like God wants you to stay in the polarity or out of the polarity? And it's probably situational, it's probably personal, but I'd be curious to know your thoughts and feelings on it.
same,
Mm.
same. Okay, well, thank you for joining us in this conversation. And I'm glad you stuck through to part 2 of the conversation when last time you got part 1. But yeah, I'd also be really curious to hear what everybody has to say. And we appreciate you sticking with us.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.